Okay, so Jhin deserves every single nerf that is coming for him right now, honestly. I see people complaining on the internet non-stop about how ADCs would be the worst it's ever been and so on and so forth, but honestly guys, I've been playing this game for so many years, and for, let's say, 95% of all patches, ADC mains will complain about literally anything. Anyway, Jhin is an absolute monster, and I'll tell you how you should play him in the current meta, because obviously everyone cares about winning, right? And by the way, sorry for my long absence, but the last couple of months were hands down the most stressful my life's ever been, and between eating, sleeping, walking my dog, and, I don't know, spending time on my real life job, there just wasn't any time left for YouTube. Anyway, you're here for the Jhin guide, so first of all, here's what makes him strong. Jhin has phenomenal wave clear, early game burst damage and playmaking potential, and all three of these things are premium qualities if you want agency in solo queue. So your game plan with Jhin essentially stays the same as always. Yes, despite Riot trying to slow the game down by nerfing all completed items, it's still the same story for Jhin. You still want to pressure in lane as much as possible using your powerful tools, but how you continue is different now. So first of all, the tools you need most during the early game are your Q and your 4th shot auto attack, because they're your bread and butter for controlling the wave and for following up on whatever your support is doing, assuming they're doing anything at all. By the way, even if you are new to the game, Jhin is a good champion to pick up and learn, because he will literally force you to learn the crucial principle of cooldown-based trading patterns. And he makes it very simple and obvious as well. So I always preach that auto attacks are basically spells that don't cost mana, and their cooldown is just determined by your attack speed. And on Jhin, this idea is probably the most obvious it can be. Your 4th shot is very powerful, so you get it ready, initiate a trade, and then walk back out when your auto is on cooldown, and you can use your passive movement speed boost for this, so it's super easy and straightforward. And this way you don't get punished when you can't defend yourself, when your auto is on cooldown. So your ideal game plan as Jhin is to win lane by using your superior trading potential, and then in the mid game you want to group up with your team and look for follow-up engages with your W snare. Also an extremely skill-reliant tool, just like your cooldown-based trading patterns, because, I mean, when you learn to hit it, your team gets easy picks, easy advantage, and when you miss, you at least know that it's entirely your fault, right? I mean, so at least you don't have to suffer the feeling of, I don't know, the game just happening around you while there's nothing you could do to help your team. I mean, we've all been there, it happens occasionally, but, I mean, all in all, Jhin has agency. That's the most important thing here. Perfect solo queue champion, in my opinion. Even in the mid game, by the way, your Q will stay mainly a wave clear tool, and the, let's call it age-old concept of pushing the minion wave past the river and then roaming to a different location is as strong as it's ever been. And Jhin does it very efficiently too, because not only do you clear the wave fast, but you also roam very quickly due to your movement speed. Honestly, you could reasonably carry a lot of your games by just mastering Q and W, not even pressing E or even your ultimate a single time. By the way, by mastering Q, literally what I mean is clearing the waves efficiently with it and remembering to use it between your auto attacks. W is a little bit more tricky, obviously, because the hitbox is so narrow. The other two spells, they still have their uses, of course. E is a nice tool to cover potential gank paths for safety, for example, giving you an early warning, as long as you're smart enough to watch your minimap, that is. And the spell has admittedly little use in combat, especially against high elo opponents, because they know how to avoid it. But it's yet another tool for wave clear, and it costs little mana, I think only 30, so much cheaper than your Q, so there's that. Your ultimate is best used when a fight breaks out but you're too far away to auto-attack, or when a fight is basically won and you want to snipe fleeing enemies, by the way. But seriously, do not use this spell when you could be auto-attacking instead. Jhin's autos are incredibly powerful, and using your ultimate also renders you immobile to a certain degree, and therefore you become an easy target for enemy dive champions, so don't risk that. You gotta take advantage of your movement speed to avoid them. So the game definitely has slowed down over the past months. First, they nerfed the scaling of all the runes, and now they nerf all the items, so yeah, Jhin players have to adapt. While in the beginning of the season, Jhin players were trying to you know, snowball with Dark Harvest and lethality. You have to take a different approach nowadays. For runes, you no longer take Dark Harvest, but Fleet Footwork instead, because, well, I mean, this rune has always had great synergy with Jhin. Yeah, precisely because you have so much time between auto attacks to make use of your movement speed. Think of Kog'Maw, who Haktuas the enemy on the attack speed limit. He would lose a lot of DPS when trying to reposition between auto attacks, which sometimes is still necessary, but still he would pay with a lot of damage. But Jhin has so much time between every single shot, which balances out the crazy power in every single bullet, but this means that you can essentially dash in and out of range between your attacks, messing with the enemy while still dealing maximum DPS. Basically like dash dancing in Super Smash Bros. Melee. A neat trick you can do, by the way, is charging your Fleet Footwork so it's ready on your third shot, then you shoot a minion with the third shot, getting to your fourth shot while also being super fast due to the Fleet trigger. This way you can run at the enemy and get your fourth shot in without them being able to just run away from you. Especially useful against high elo opponents, because they will pay attention to your bullet count and try to avoid the fourth shot naturally. So yeah, Jhin doesn't have to snowball, you can also just play a consistent game with Fleet Footwork. And now that you're on the precision path, choosing minor runes is quite straightforward. Presence of Mind is better than Triumph and Absorb Life, because else you could be running out of mana during fights, and this would lower your damage massively. Because as I've said, all of the downtime between attacks, yeah, you can use it for repositioning, but Jhin could also, or should also, fire off his spells between every single hit for max DPS, especially your Q. The next rune, Bloodline, so you can buy damage instead of spending gold on lifesteal, very straightforward as well. Bloodline plus Fleet is usually enough to keep you healthy, especially since Doran's Blade patches the early game as well, when Bloodline stacks are still scarce. So yeah, you don't want to buy lifesteal items essentially, because you have other things you need to buy. Last row is kind of interesting though. Many people pick Coup de Grace, which is fine, don't get me wrong, but especially high elo Jhin mains recommend Cut Down instead, and the reason is that Jhin cannot just ignore the front line and assassinate a random target. No, you need to deal with the tanks and bruisers. If you just ran past them, you just get killed. That's not how you use your movement speed. You instead want to dash in and out of range consistently for safety reasons. Secondary runes are Celerity, and you should know the reason why, I guess. Jhin likes movement speed, it just amplifies everything. And Gathering Storm also got a lot better since, you know, the games go longer, makes it more valuable because it scales over time. But it also has always been good on Jhin due to his AD multipliers. Flat AD is a great stat on this champion, easy. Now for items, your first item should always be Static Shiv. It doesn't have crit, but crit as a stat is not really important early anyways. But this item still has perfect synergy with your Q, taking your wave clear essentially to the next level as if it wasn't good enough. With the Chain Lightning and the effective attack damage it provides, your farming will be very safe now because, I mean, yeah, you do it even faster, makes it less punishable, because enemy has less time. Also, the damage against champions is nothing to scoff at. The Chain Lightning during early to mid-game skirmishes, it does fall off later on, but, I mean, value is value. A second item should be Rapid Fire Cannon in most games. Now you are starting to build crit, but more importantly you get more movement speed. You know, Shiv also has movement speed, but Shiv plus Rapid Fire, the more the better essentially. There's very little in terms of diminishing returns when it comes to movement speed and Jhin. You never want to be caught, and the more move speed you have, the better. In combination with the attack range from Rapid Fire Cannon, it actually allows you to play the game against a fed Hecarim, for example. There is only one exception to this build order. When you are super far behind, you have to take a different approach because, well, I mean, we all know these games. Teams hard feeding, zero agency, enemy top laner super fed, you name it. But in this case, you just buy Lord Dominic's Regards' second item. Safety from Rapid Fire Cannon is a luxury here, and your priority must be to make sure that the enemy front line can't just ignore you. Yes, it feels bad, but LDR second will be your best chance to get back into the game in such a case. In an even to winning game though, the build order is Shiv, Cannon, IE, then LDR. Slightly losing game, Shiv, Cannon, then LDR third, and then Infinity Edge after. Rule of thumb, the harder you're losing, the earlier you need your Lord Dominic's Regards. but this should be the exception, really. The thing with these guides, though, especially when it comes to items and runes, is that you as a viewer can sometimes hardly tell if they still apply or if the guide is already outdated, depending on when you watch this video. So what I will do for you is I will put links to some high Elo Jhin mains in the video description, so you can have, or you have an easier time to keep up with with newer metagame developments. Felt nice to make a video again, honestly.